Good evening, everyone. Really nice to be here with you all. It has been a couple weeks since I've been here, and I have missed it. I'm delighted to say I'm back for quite a long series of classes broken up by only one absence, so we're going to get some good momentum going. This evening we're really going to focus on compassion, and it's always good, always needed. And we've been making our way through this book, which compared to the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, it's like a Post-it, right? It's so to the point. It's like, remember and move on. And I've been really enjoying rereading this book. And it's funny, I'm like, wow, I'm glad the Dalai Lama is so compassionate, because I rip him off so much. So much of what I think I've come up with on my own, no. It was his idea, and the way that he wove Western psychological science into the Dharma so it could be accessible for everyone. And he does it in a way that is just so undogmatic and so unjargony from the scientific way that it's, in my opinion, undeniable. And Tundra shared with me, you guys made it through the quest for happiness, more or less. It's an ongoing process, ongoing quest. And this evening, we're going to move into the foundation of well-being that compassion is for all of us. And before we move on to that, I want to highlight this beautiful way that the Dalai Lama, and I will call him His Holiness. I consider him a spiritual figure. Some folks just say Dalai Lama, but I will call him His Holiness. If you want to ask a question, it's up to you how you prefer to use that title. The way that he connects this idea of happiness to compassion is really elegant. And I'm totally going to rip him off for a training I'm leading this weekend, because he says it just so beautifully. The way that he approaches happiness is recognizing that, of course, there is a surface happiness that we can enjoy through sensory pleasures of food and friends and this beautiful weather and sunsets. And there's a deeper level of happiness, and one that is more about intrinsic well-being and peace of mind. And that peace of mind specifically, he says it's like a defense against hardships. Not only is it a defense against hardships, it's in some ways the only way we can even appreciate that other outer level of enjoyment. Have you guys ever had plans for a perfect day? You've been working nonstop, it's been hell, and you're like, I have this one day off, and we're gonna go to Tam, and we're gonna have a picnic, and it's gonna be beautiful. But at the inner level, you're just pissed and grumpy, and you can't enjoy anything, right? And so all of us have had these insights at some point that our inner well-being, it's truly the foundation for enjoyment. Sometimes we get lucky and outer works, and a nice day up on Mount Tam or eating a great meal just makes us feel good, even if our inner being's kind of checked out. But this idea that cultivating the peace of mind is a defense against hardship, I find that really inspiring. And I also find it a really nice guiding light. What are we looking towards? Are we looking towards enlightenment, waking up? Yeah. What does that actually feel like, though? It feels like being able to see reality as it is, being, as my teacher calls it, a lover of reality, truly loving reality as it is. And that generates a peace of mind. We can be with what is put in front of us. He also says, I think very well, that in addition to being able to cultivate this peace of mind that comes from inner well-being, accepting reality as it is, that a sense of belonging, connection, this is enormously important, as well as a sense of purpose beyond our own self-interest. And that for both that sense of belonging, community, and our sense of purpose, compassion's a foundation. So I love that setup. For our meditation this evening, we're going to start off in a slightly unorthodox way, because why not? And that is going to be, who here sometimes struggles when we do visualization practices of meditation and I or another teacher ask you to bring to mind someone who you really care about or who's really suffering, and you're like, well, there's this person and that person and this, and I don't even know. The list goes on, or your mind goes totally blank. So we're going to try to subvert that process or practice by having a very brief conversation with someone near us. Engage your fear, introverts. We will be talking to another person. And it's not going to be a conversation. Whew. We're just going to describe someone who, when we're in their presence, sometimes, we're going to try to keep the bar low, makes us feel good. Makes us feel like we matter or we are cared about. Now, this is a complex ask for a lot of people. There are very few relationships that any of us have in which that is sustained and all the time. Often we feel that sometimes, but maybe sometimes it feels contingent, or we question it, or we're uncertain. I have to totally admit, even with my cat, sometimes. He ran away last week, and then he came home and he was kind of a brat. And I was like, my one source of ongoing well-being and joy, he ran away. Sorry, that's an update for a dear friend of my cat. And so we don't have to think of someone who is reliably all the time making us feel good. I was fortunate to have a visit from a very dear friend this weekend. We've known each other over a decade. There has been times when I felt her unconditional love, as well as, maybe she was too busy, or maybe she was mad at me. All those things occur. But in this case, I would bring to mind that feeling of when I met her at the airport and it was like, our hearts are meeting, I feel so cared about. So that's the person I want you to describe. You don't need to tell an entire biography of how you know them and why. What I really want you to describe to the person next to you is what it is like to be in the presence of this person, and what are the qualities that you enjoy about them. We're going to do this only 3 minutes per person. When you are listening, you are going to listen, you can nod and smile. Do not get into crosstalk, no conversation of I know that person, or yeah, me too, just listening, receiving. I'd ask you to do this writing, but it's even more likely that you would kind of space out or not focus. When there's someone in front of you, the level of concentration is high. Yes, slightly awkward, but you are attentive. And the whole goal here is to start generating or turning over that capacity to feel compassion, and to feel compassion someone is sharing with you, so that we aren't in the middle of practice trying to figure that out. So please find another person, whoever is wearing the darker colored lower part, pants or otherwise, will start. Say hi to them. I will ring the bell for you to begin. So find another person. If you don't have someone, raise your hand so you can find someone. Okay, does anyone else need a partner? This person coming in, you can let them know.
No, so we're going to do a partner.
Or are you a third? Okay, there's also. Okay, there we go. Person with the darker color jeans, describing the qualities of someone who feels compassionate with you. right. Thank your partner and find your seat for meditation. As always in our meditation practice, we want to have a really nice balance between a feeling of ease and relaxation, as though we are able to care for ourselves, as well as a bit of discipline, finding the dignity of this practice through our posture. So that means having a nice upright spine and feeling a sense of ease and relaxation through the front of our body. So a softening through the chest and the belly. And we might want to imagine that there's an invisible string from our heart up to the ceiling, giving a little lift to our chest. And to help that process, we can inhale our shoulders up to our ears and then exhale them down our back. And twice more, bringing our shoulders up. And then relaxing and melting one more time. Find that nice upright spine. And find a position that you can comfortably maintain as much stillness as possible for the next 25 minutes or so. Stillness of the body really helps with stillness of the mind. So if you have an itch or an ache, no problem. But try to bring awareness to the itch or to the ache, so that our entire practice can be infused with this level of introspection where we really notice what's happening. I notice that there's an itch on my shoulder, or I notice that my hip is aching and I want to move. And then deliberately move. Let everything that happens in this practice be part of our mindfulness. Begin by finding the support from the chair or the ground beneath you. And once that support is found at the buttocks or the legs, allow yourself to gently yield and release. For the moment, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go. We're free to just be here, to be supported. We can lean into that support a bit by just considering all the causes and conditions that have allowed us to be here. Someone who fabricated these chairs, someone who built the floorboards beneath us, the roof above us. The many dozens of volunteers and board members who keep the lights on, invite us in. Feel the generosity through the support beneath you, as though you were being held in meditation. And to help steady the mind, we'll engage in a bit of attention shamatha practice. drawing the full force of our attention to noticing sensations throughout the body. So as we inhale, we notice tactile sensations. As we exhale, we notice those felt sensations in the body, wherever it's easy to notice them. Keep your attention noticing, not bounded to one specific place. You can notice to the face or the back of the head. You can notice around the shoulders or the legs. And harness in the attention a bit to notice sensations just at the belly. Feel and experience the sensations as the belly rises and then falls. No need for conceptual elaboration, just noticing, feeling into the breath. Right at the belly rising and the belly falling. Right when you notice your attention has been swept away by a thought or a memory or image, simply relax, disengage, and return to the simple practice of noticing sensations at the belly. Though incredibly subtle and somewhat uninteresting, is there anything peaceful here? Just noticing just noticing the breath and the belly. Narrow and shift the focus once again. Now to notice the subtle sensations of breath traveling in and out of the nostrils. Notice the coolness and quality of air traveling in, and the warmth and quality of air traveling out. See if you can sustain even 1 or 2 breaths of full attention just here at the subtle sensations of breath at the nostrils. And once again, though simple and subtle, is there a quality of peace or relaxation in simply resting our mind here in one place, one task? Now we'll gently shift away from attending to the breath and body and bring our attention to the space of the mind and memory. I'm going to invite you to once again consider this person who in their presence you feel care, you feel their consideration, their concern, their kindness, their compassion for you. Bring them to mind vividly, as though they were right here. And feel or imagine those qualities and sensations of their loving presence. Feel or imagine the compassion that they have for you and your struggles. And invite your heart to open to those struggles. You don't have to create a list or be specific, but just recognize that there are struggles. There are challenging relationships. There are difficult circumstances. Limitations in our physical or mental health or well-being. And as we open tenderly to the challenges, we invite in a receiving of this loving presence, igniting our own heart of compassion. Feel that loving presence as though it were illuminating your own heart. Through inhale, take in that loving presence. Through exhale, circulate and radiate that loving presence throughout the body. Feel the nourishment of that opening to our own compassion. If this is hard to feel, it's okay. Keep visualizing, using the breath to draw in and extend. And now that we've received and nourished ourselves with compassion, let's consider extending this compassion to that cherished and beloved person. We may or may not know the extent of their difficulties or challenges or struggles, but we can be certain that they are there. So in the same way, we draw in a sense of compassion, care, and extend out a wish for them. May they feel safe. May they feel connected. May they be healthy. And continuing with your breath, drawing in and extending the wish of compassion with the words most meaningful for you. Holding this person vividly in mind and extending out. And now completely release the image of this person while maintaining that fuel and fire of compassion in your own heart. And instead, bring to mind the person with whom you did this dyad activity, who told you about a loved one. Maybe you know this person, maybe this is the first time you've ever seen them. Bring them to mind vividly, as though they were once again right in front of you. And though you don't know this person, imagine that they too struggle, feel lonely or disconnected, have challenges of health or well-being. And generate a real heartfelt aspiration of compassion for them. Considering them on your inhale and exhale, extending out. May they be happy. Find the causes of happiness. May they be free from unnecessary suffering. May they find ease and peace. And to continue to expand our sphere of concern, generating a more global or universal compassion. Let's also bring to mind the person that they described, the person they cherish. We don't know them. We've never even seen them. Yet we can imagine that they too are deserving of compassion. A human being who wants to be happy and avoid suffering. So as a practice of extending and expanding our compassion, let's bring forth an image or idea of this person and extend out compassion to them. Inhale, drawing in. Exhale, extending out. Now release the image of the person you spoke with, their cherished person. Simply come back to an awareness of the body, of the breath. Letting any generated sensations of care and warmth and kindness simply circulate naturally. Questions or reflections on your practice? Yeah.
Thanks, that was helpful. What I thought was kind of interesting is when you first said bring to mind someone who would you feel seen and heard, I immediately thought of the person that I don't right now feel seen and heard by. So, but then I quickly realized that there's actually, and then when you're like, oh, we don't have a lot of people, and I was like, I actually felt like I had a lot of people, and that felt good, and it made me feel, it made the person who was not feeling that way about it, felt like that was maybe less biting or less ouchy.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, unfortunately, overcoming our negativity bias is really tough, especially depending on our whole constellation of other traits and states. But what's unsafe is really appealing to our mind. So glad to hear that. Anybody else? How is it to bring to mind your cherished person, but the cherished person of someone you maybe just met? Sweet? Yeah. Yeah. You guys just like floating in compassion, joy right now? Can feel pretty good. Yeah. Anyone have struggles? Loving presence can be a really hard practice. Anyone have struggles or questions about anything that came up? Yeah.
Well, for me, it's always the body, because I could, but then, like what you said, if something aches or this or that,
Yes.
it just
Pulls you out.
yes.
Okay. So in sitting, like something will start to hurt,
Yeah.
and your attention goes there. And is there an awareness before you move?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I could dissect it.
Yeah.
Besides, it's like a knee-jerk reaction.
Right.
Yeah.
Of feeling the pain, for example, and then the reaction is, I don't want this, and this is bad.
Well, I just want to it's hard to sit with it. It's hard to focus on the compassion or
Right.
whatever you're doing because the body seems to, it has a mind of its own.
Yeah, well, there's no separation, right? And I do think I struggle with a lot of back pain off and on, and I was on retreat last week, thank the Dakini for that, and was sitting with a lot of back pain, and I have done that over the years, and there's a lot of ways to practice with it. And especially in compassion practice, like your whole practice is compassion towards that aching part. I think part of the no, not now, I don't want to feel this, can exacerbate the pain. And as I've mentioned here before, part of the reason I have a job, for example, is all of the incredible research done on how mindfulness and meditation helps reduce pain. And it helps reduce pain because we recognize the pain as sensation and can disentangle it from, I wish this wasn't happening and I don't like that. Because that contraction of our mind actually has an inflammatory process on wherever it is we're feeling pain. And so we can learn a lot from sitting with pain. By the way, I'm Eve Ekman. Hi. I just realized I am your teacher here tonight, San Francisco Dharma Collective. I work here. I work at the Greater Good Science Center where I am in this world of psychological research and the practice and training of meditation. And I welcome you all here. It's been a while. I forgot to introduce myself. And welcome you to this center. And that's all. Enough for now. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions or comments on that practice? Yes?
I was feeling super tender when I first got here, because there was this way that something in a particular relationship, I felt disappointed about the exchange, and I was having suffering, and so it was super this was a corrective experience in the sense of imagining oh yeah, all y'all are have the same stuff come up,
Yeah.
disappointment, and you have whatever it is, and I was oh wow, that's so equalizing and really just right-sizing everything in the end. Whatever about, I'll learn more about the disappointment on the walk home, but, it was just it felt really just oh, okay, right, me too, everyone too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing how we can hear this teaching how many millions of times? And then we apply it and we're like, oh my God, this stuff is great. Yeah, it's unbelievable how our own pain contracts us away from the reality of everyone's pain. It's just there is an evolutionary purpose, I'm sure. Right now it really escapes me. Why is that? Why are we I'm in pain, I can't deal with anyone else's pain, right? And then paradoxically opening up to other people's suffering reduces ours. Just awesome and unpredicted. Yeah. Also, I kind of snuck in an empathetic joy practice there, just because being with this person who's sharing about someone who is caring feels good to hear about it. So, we're neurobiologically hardwired to feel good when someone else feels good in front of us. So did anybody notice feeling good listening? Yeah, it's oh, nice. I want to meet that person. They sound great. Or maybe not, but it's delighting in another person feeling cared about. Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments about this practice or being forced to talk to a maybe stranger or not so stranger? Yeah, say.
Yeah, the person I chose was somebody I talk to regularly, and I had been out of town a week or so ago, and we hadn't been talking. And so lately I've had this feeling how come they don't call me? Why do I have to be the one to call them and everything? And I actually led a loving kindness meditation earlier today, and that's what reminded me to just be that's Mara, that's in my head. This is somebody who is on my side. And then when we did the meditation, I tried to sort of have the approach that the Dalai Lama talks about in the book of just it's just the practice. It's not, you're not trying to get anything, you're not loving them so that they will love you back.
Right.
You're just doing the practice of compassion. and there was like a different feel to
Yes.
in that respect.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, good foreshadowing for what we're going to cover. It's really hard to do, and we can have both levels. We can love someone and want stuff from them, and we can love them more than that at the same time. This idea that we're going to somehow be able to completely unhook ourselves from wanting the people we love to love us back, yeah, right. We want that, but that doesn't have to be the limit of our love. If we're not getting it, is there more love that we still have available? And so, yeah, I love that that awareness. And you know, it's amazing. We are such complex relational beings, and we can have this idea of someone, and they are just, man, they are the best. They are so awesome. Then we have like one awkward situation where we're like, I'm not sure anymore. Right? Like we're so fickle in some ways about our care. But there's a deeper level. Often that like perturbation is at the surface, and there's a deeper level of care and compassion. Yeah. Yes.
I'm just wondering, I've been feeling my heart open a lot,
Mm-hmm.
retreat, and before that doing a lot of metta for, I don't know, 2-3 months. And a lot of rawness coming home from the retreat. But I guess my question is, like, are there dangers of opening? I mean, I'm kind of wondering where's the limit, and is there some kind of protection I can do?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I had the very same question for my teacher, who's Jennifer Wellwood. And yeah, because there is a way in which our expanded heart is, it's, as Chogyam Trungpa would say, it's like raw meat. And like you can feel everything on it, right? And there's an interesting suggestion, at least from the side of contemplative practices, that at a certain, like we have the feelingfulness, and then at some point we recognize transparency. And that feelingfulness isn't I feel so much and it's all like happening. It's like I feel so much and it expands out to a different level. Now, I know what that feels like. I have been there where it feels as though that compassionate capacity, instead of feeling like rawness, feels like bodhisattva power. Feels like I can then direct it towards helping others. And I have felt it of like, oh my God, like, yeah, it's like I don't have any skin on. Like I feel everything. So I don't have an answer for you, but I feel very confident in that instruction of looking for the place where that tenderness feels as though it's a directable power, right? Something we can use in service of. Otherwise, you can't actually break open your heart. Meaning, like, if you continue to expand it, it actually should make things easier and not harder. The more care, and this is luckily what this chapter is about, the more care and compassion we have, the better our well-being. Now, again, it's this interesting thing where I love four immeasurable practices. I love the loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, and empathetic joy. And yet, I sometimes feel like it's almost like cheating, because like it feels good, right? And a lot of meditation does not feel good. And it doesn't feel good for everyone, but it can feel good. But it can also give us the false assumption that feeling good is the point of meditation, or feeling good is the ultimate destination of meditation. And what we really want, or what we're really seeking, is more that peace of mind, which has a little less feelingfulness than compassion. Compassion is an important skill to develop, and we use it in response to this world. But where we want to land, or where we want to be, is a place that isn't quite so acutely emotional. Mm-hmm. And I've heard teachers say often that if your compassion is and this isn't your question, but just to elaborate, if your compassion is making you sad, you're getting a little too involved. Which is paradoxical from the Western point of view, because we're like, oh, it's sympathy, compassion, it's the same kind of thing. I'm sad about the suffering of the world. No, your heart is completely open and thereby energized in order to be able to hold the suffering of the world. And the more you open it, the less room there is for fear, jealousy, anxiety, and anger. which would be the other ways we might respond to the suffering of the world. So we'll get into it directly with someone who says it in a much pithier way. So this is this book that came with me to the beach and got a little beat up, but had a good time. So it is Beyond Religion. And he wrote this as ethics for a whole world, a complete world, a connected world. And I really like that idea more than ever. I really also like the idea of ethics in our spiritual communities, which unfortunately continue to be torn apart by unethical behavior by people in this position. So I want to have an engaged dialogue about ethics and what that looks like at a human value level. So that's part of my motivation. Okay. So this chapter, compassion, the foundation of well-being. I'm going to read a passage here. Like all other mammals, we humans are born from our mothers, and for some time after birth, we are utterly dependent on attention of our mothers or other caring adults. For 9 months, we are nurtured in our mother's womb. At the moment of birth, we are completely helpless. We can neither sit nor crawl, let alone stand or walk. And without the care and attention of others, we cannot survive. In this state of absolute vulnerability, our first act as a newborn baby is to suck at our mother's breast. And with her milk, we are nurtured and given strength. In fact, the period of dependency for young humans is particularly long. This goes for all of us, including even the worst criminals. Without another loving care, none of us would have lived more than a few days. As a result of this intense need for others in our early development, a disposition toward affection is part of our biology. And he, if you've ever seen His Holiness talk, he talks about a mother's love very often when he describes compassion, and that all of us understand compassion. And this is challenging. Some of us have highly complex relationships with our primary caregivers, so that's real. And in order for us to survive, there was some level of attention. We did make it, and we are completely vulnerable at birth. And he's absolutely right. We are hardwired to receive that care and compassion. In fact, a lot of research on empathy has shown us that some of the very kind of blueprint for our empathic capacity is built in the attunement between the mother and the infant. And that system of being able to connect, recognize, feel seen, see another, that was designed so that we could survive as these totally vulnerable infants and receive care. I find that enormously tenderizing, this kind of receiving of love. Then he goes into, it's so funny, he goes into like all this research, which I enjoy, but his also some ways not to the point. But he talks about one of the many research studies that looks at touch at an early age. And we need a basic feeling of being cared about. And there's some pretty unfortunate experiments, not necessarily intentionally experiments, but where children have been removed from any physical contact, maybe because they were ill or because an orphanage did not know how important physical touch was. And the development of these children is severely impaired, not just at a physical level, but at a cognitive level. Without touch, without the feeling of embodied compassion, people's brains do not develop in the appropriate way. So we recognize that this compassion and this care, it's not just a nice thing we like in San Francisco, right? It is literally part of what allows us to develop and function as human beings. But it's not just for us when we're children, right? We don't need compassion only in that early phase of development. We need it when we are vulnerable. Can anybody think of times when they've been vulnerable and need compassion in the last 3 hours? What are some examples of adult vulnerability times when we could really use compassion? Dinner with your ex-boyfriend. Yes, for 500. Yes.
Hormonal and tired.
When hormonal and tired. Yes. Yeah.
Hearing
Yes. Yes. And in that case, in both cases, we want comfort, right? Yeah. Was there another one over here?
Working hard on something, submitting it, and have it rejected.
In the face of rejection. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And in the face of illness, right? I had a nice meeting with 10 out of 10 pain 3 weeks ago, and I was unbelievably, I felt so vulnerable. There's nothing and nowhere to go, nothing to do, and all you want is to just feel wrapped in someone else's care. They can't take that pain away from you. And yet, that compassion, it just matters so much. And one thing His Holiness brings up here is that we actually really want compassion when we're dying, when we're at the very end of our life. When in fact, again, no one is going to be able to prevent the end of our life. And what people think of us, it won't matter, right? We are leaving, and yet our desire to be cared about and loved at the end of life, just as well as the beginning of life. He's really making the case here that compassion is a fact of our human nature. Oh, Siri, we don't need your help. Thank you. Siri's been very active these days. I hope she's sending messages to Russia and the White House. Take it, compassion. Yes, if only, if only. So this receiving of compassion, needless to say, it's feels incredible for us as human beings. It's also a part of natural development for many other species. So there's been these kind of incredible studies with rodents as well as chimpanzees, and even the way that maternal affection goes among rodents is licking and grooming. And the so-called high-licking mothers of rats, they have these very adventurous, ready and free to explore rats. Whereas the mothers who are preoccupied and not high-licking, you create, for not just one generation, but 2 generations, anxious rats who are not as likely to explore and get their rewards. And it's a silly example. The researcher who does that work, Darlene Francis, is by no means silly. She's a warrior of compassion. She's out there doing incredible social justice work in the world. And it's just amazing how, again, we can see this incredible importance at a physical level, at a survival level of compassion. But it doesn't stop there. Not only does compassion feel good to receive, it actually feels even better to give, right? So did anyone have a sense of, when they were receiving that loving presence, it was good, that was good, but giving the loving presence back, did anybody notice that maybe had a bit more feelingfulness? So when we think about lighting the ember of our compassion, it doesn't really matter what it takes. And we find it naturally all day. I saw this little toddler today, and just their whole situation was so compassion-inducing. Them trying to walk, looking so cute, falling over. I was like, oh, their compassion fills me up. Didn't need to try, right? And so when we're in our meditation practice, whatever can generate or cultivate the spark of compassion, we can then rest there. And in some practices, what we do is we just ignite it, and then we rest and hang out there. For most of us, we need to constantly ignite because either we get distracted, it gets diffuse, we start thinking about other stuff, or it gets less feelingful. But whether it's us feeling the loving presence or giving the loving presence, for the purposes of practice, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whatever it takes to ignite that feeling. But I really love how the Dalai Lama makes the case here that compassion feels as good when we're extending it to others as for ourselves. Yeah.
So you're using compassion almost interchangeably just with sort of generosity and kindness.
Correct.
It's not in the CEB definition.
Not in the, I'm using compassion in the, as kindness
Okay.
and care.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just what happens in the face of someone else's suffering.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's
Your fault.
my fault, I know. And that, and that definition of compassion which would be a more traditional one, right? Of compassion is our heartfelt aspiration to alleviate suffering. Now, the way the Dalai Lama is using it, and he's about to narrow it in a little, is more about almost all of our pro-social motivation. Our desire to care, our desire to connect, kindness, generosity. When we're in a state of compassion, all of those can arise. But he here is using it a bit more generally, not just in the face of suffering. So then, let's see here. Yeah, so then he shares this kind of beautiful story, a little bit like what Pamela was talking about, how having compassion for other people can actually help alleviate our pain in a different way, where we can be really focused on our own stuff, like, oh man, my back hurts for me, like, why is this happening to me? This is the best surf of the season. This is unfair, right? Like, this shouldn't be this way. And then I extend my heart and recognize the suffering of other people. And as I'm doing that, as I'm engaging in my real heartfelt care of what's going on maybe for my neighbor or for someone across the globe or for my brothers and sisters who are incarcerated, right? And I think, wow, that is so incredibly hard. I so wish that there was freedom from suffering there. My own suffering is like a little less prominent. Have you guys had that experience? Where your own suffering is slightly, it's not like you don't matter, but can be diminished in the face of just great, vast suffering. The key here, which he doesn't talk about, is how do you not succumb to despair? Because it's one thing to recognize maybe the scope, right, of, wow, there's a lot, what I'm going through compared, but that can almost lead to an unhealthy way in which we diminish our own needs and then feel this overwhelming emotional and empathic fatigue about the suffering of others. Any thoughts on that? How do we engage with the national news cycle with a caring heart?
I'd like to know.
Yeah. I have some ideas, but I'd be curious from this wise audience, what do folks think? How do we engage with the suffering of the world with compassion in a way that doesn't make us overwhelmed? Yeah.
We did a meditation on equanimity
Mm-hmm.
on Sunday, and it was amazing because it's so simple the way it describes that even though I can wish you peace and happiness, it is your behavior and your attitudes and your actions will determine if you're happy or not.
Yeah.
It's not in my control.
Yes.
So there's a lot of kindness without taking on the burden of
Yes.
making it happen.
That's right.
And just recognizing that everybody wants to be happy, even if they don't have the skills to attain happiness, or even if they're creating a lot of harm for others or for the entire planet.
Yes.
I'm still not at a point where I can feel that kind of equanimity with our freaking president, but I'm not perfect. So,
Yeah.
I can feel that kind of balance
Mhm.
with a lot of difficult people in my life. And
Yeah.
there is such a sense of freedom that I've never experienced before.
Beautiful.
So
Yeah.
that practice for me is everything.
Yes. It is. Equanimity practice really allows us to hold all of the heart practices in balance, right? Yeah. And I think you said really beautifully that equanimity practice allows us to recognize our compassion is enough, right? It doesn't have to lead to a specific outcome. That's up to that person, right? Or up to other circumstances. So we can hold the compassion for someone who is harmful, but we can also hold the compassion for someone who is greatly suffering and we have no power to help. What can we do for Syrian refugees right now, all of us? Not a lot. We can hold them in our heart with compassion and not succumb to the feeling of guilt, regret, and despair, because the world does not need more people who feel guilt, regret, and despair, right? And that again comes to the compassionate warrior. What is ours to do and what is ours not to do? And when we're clear about that, we have more space for our compassion to naturally arise. We do have some control. There are some areas where we have control and we can change. And if we are constantly and consistently practicing a a compassion that is happening here, right? Like we respond to the activities and experience of the world with a readiness of compassion, so that when an action is possible, we're right there. Instead of, I'm only going to feel compassion for the things that I can help and change. Everything else, let's just kind of pretend it's not happening, right? Not a possibility for us to be truly effective in our overall compassionate goals. Yeah, thanks. Other ways that we can? Yeah.
I've been thinking about it. I mean, I feel like there's like this setup right now that where I feel like on social media there's a sense of hate, trying to get us to hate our fellow Americans. And I keep trying to think kind thoughts about people that I disagree with, like listening, listening to a town hall and like people talking about, stuff that's coming out of Fox News. It's clearly not true. And I think they're afraid and they've been whipped up into a frenzy, many of them. And so for me, sometimes just feeling compassion for them because they're deceived.
Yes.
They're actually not, they think that they're doing things that will help things. And I think they honestly believe that.
Yeah. And I think it can be even more simple, right? Just, as was stated, that everybody wants to be happy and free from suffering. Our value judgment around it, it can get tricky because it can push our compassion into more like pity. Like, oh, you poor people who don't have access to accurate information, I care about you. But there's a distance, right? And we have to be really onto ourselves about when our care becomes more like sympathy. This is true not only, of course, of world news figures, but family members. Right? And I think it's harder for us to practice at home, where we have people in our life and we're like, they don't come to San Francisco Dharma Collective. They've never met the Dharma. They're doing their best. They're trying in their limited way. And then we think we're being compassionate, but we're actually kind of being disparaging, right? And so there's a lot of nuance to just keeping it simple, actually. So thank you for that. Yeah. And the next part here is, and I hear this a lot when I talk about compassion, which is this worry that if we become too compassionate, are we going to give up our own ability to care for ourselves? Are we going to be so caught up caring for others? Is this going to work? How can I be so considerate of others? I actually have to look out for myself. And I really like the way His Holiness talks about it. He says, what is important is that when pursuing our own self-interest, we should be wise selfish, not foolish selfish. Being foolish selfish means pursuing our own interests in a narrow, short-sighted way. Being wise selfish means taking a broader view and recognizing that our own long-term individual interest lies in the welfare of everyone. Being wise selfish means being compassionate. So this relates to one of the famous quotes of his, which is, if you want to be happy, practice compassion. If you want other people to be happy, practice compassion. Right? That we can call it enlightened self-interest. And there's been like a decades-long debate in the field of empathy research, which is very similar to some of the compassion research of, are people empathic out of true altruism, or is it self-interest? Do they really want to help other people, or do they just like the way it feels to reduce their distress, right? Like, that person's suffering, I need to do something, right? Then I will feel better. Or I need to do something and someone will watch and I'll look great. I'm a nice person helping. And you know what? Who cares? It's all true, right? We can have a genuine altruistic motivation. We can also enjoy that people appreciate us for doing good, and it intrinsically feels good to help other people, period. If you try to get rid of that, you're just like a weird sadist. It's not like, come on, it does feel good to help others. Great. How many care providers do we have in the room tonight? Hey y'all, does it feel good to help others? Sure. Yes. Could you stay one more day in your job if it didn't?
Nope.
Absolutely not. You cannot pay someone enough to do that kind of work.
We don't get paid enough to do that work.
Period.
Just saying.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So there's a way in which like it's okay. Like let's be honest about the fact that this feels good and that we can even savor that. We can enjoy it, we can extend it. Noticing what it feels like to have compassion for others and really feeling like this is good. This is right. Maybe not like self-aggrandizing, right? But a little bit of goodness on that. Any questions on that controversial statement?
I have like, sometimes I feel like my compassion button is broken or something. And I feel like I have a pretty easy time like in my day-to-day life, or if someone, even that I don't know, says something and they're suffering, or if I can see, like, even for the people I see that actually are obviously not doing well, like
Yeah.
the person freaking out on their partner in the street and screaming, or the person, you know, at 3 a.m. like talking, screaming at themselves. I have a lot of compassion for the like immediate, especially if I can see that this person is really suffering emotionally, but like on the sort of global level that feels hard. I also feel like I have a hard time because I feel like a lot of people do pretty well on like a global level. I'm around people that are so they're helping everyone, they're doing all these great things, and then on a day-to-day personal level, they're an asshole.
Yeah.
And that really, like, it's a huge trigger for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, but wait, where's the compassion? Because I'm having a bad day, or this person's having a bad time, and
Yeah.
just like wipe right over that because it's all about the children being separated from their families.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, it gets all, and then I just like, oh my gosh, my compassion just feels broken.
Yeah, I think there's a both and. One, yes, spiritual bypass is abundant, right? So the ability to have a compassionate idea of ourselves as a practitioner and a spiritual practitioner, and then really miss out on the ground practices. That unfortunately happens a lot, just period. Not our problem, let's have compassion for them too. And then the part of it being broken, you know, I don't agree. I think that really what I would call successful compassion requires empathy. So we can have compassion as a quality that we're generating, right? That is, we have a caring quality of compassion. But to enact that compassion effectively, to be the island for those who need landfall, or the lamp for those who need light, or the bed for those who need rest, we have to know, well, who needs rest? And who needs a lamp? And who needs an island? And that means that we need to empathically understand the suffering of others. So it makes sense to me that it's easier for you when it's someone here and you see their suffering or you have some sense of it, but when it's like diffuse, it's harder. And so a lot of the empathy training that's done in educational systems and hospital systems is humanizing the individual. So making the big one. And so in some of the compassion practices I've received, let's say you are thinking of something huge, like what has been going on at our borders, and you think of just one mother. Just one mother. And even just saying it, like without any details, it's overwhelming, right? And that is, and then we like have to kind of really skillfully attenuate our leaning into and leaning out of, right? That is incredibly meaningful. It is incredibly heartful. It's not ours. So the skill with empathy, right, is how do I not fall into distress and be able to have this compassion that is spacious. So empathic distress is like, this is so hard, I can't hold it, as though it had to be held in us. And compassion is, this is so hard, I care so much. I'm open to it. It's paradoxical, and yet when we try it out, we find our own answer, or our own felt experience of holding with openness the suffering. Yeah, great question. Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah.
It's interesting when you were saying that, because what happens is I have this mantra in my head. It's like my problems are like first world problems. You know, like it's like because of what's happening at the border or what's happening. And
Yeah.
they're like, oh, this happens to, and then I'm like, what am I talking about? Because
Yeah.
this is nothing compared to, but then it's like I feel guilty for
Right. Yes.
that too.
There's again another both and there where first world problems are in a relative scope not as hard to bear, and suffering is suffering is suffering. There's a wonderful author, Elie Wiesel. Happy Yom Kippur, all, by the way. Okay, now, Happy New Year, Shana Tova. There's a writer, Elie Wiesel, who is Jewish, that's why I thought of this, and he writes about the Holocaust, and in one phrase or one sentence, he said, suffering is like an invisible gas. So if you have this amount of space for an invisible gas or this amount of space, it fills the space completely. And so whether or not your suffering is, they ran out of my favorite oat milk, or like whatever the thing is, that's like a little extremely not suffering, but right? Whatever the so-called first world problem is, like it's still an experience of suffering that is filling the space. And there's still an opportunity for tenderness. We are absolutely no good at compassion for others if we have not forged those channels for ourselves. So though it may seem more, spiritually wholesome to like care about others, like good luck, the cost of that will be very soon met. And the cost of that is burnout, right? We cannot continue to care about others without deeply forging those channels for ourselves, whether or not it's small or big, whether or not we get $200 parking ticket, that really sucks. It is a first world problem, but it sucks. And in that moment, you can have compassion for yourself instead of, F this city, F those people, actually, I suck, why does this always happen to me? Like the whole constellation of suffering that could be created also deserves suffering. I'm sorry, compassion. Excuse me. Yeah, Freudian slip there. No, more compassion. I'm so busted. I haven't gotten a parking ticket in a while. I'm totally going to get one now. But,
Can I just say there,
yeah.
So like when I've heard this conversation before.
Yeah.
And it feels strange to me because I feel like it's like, I don't know how to say this without sounding weird. Like when I hear first world problem, then it just feels like, well wait, I got a student who's got crazy anxiety. She's always hyperventilating.
Yeah.
She's this well-off white girl from
Yeah.
and it's like I don't know that her suffering is any less or more than
Right.
someone who's been separated from someone they love, or someone who didn't quite have enough to eat. Like I don't like those.
Yeah.
I don't want to compare those and judge which suffering
That's right.
seems, because I don't actually have any idea.
Yeah, and I think that's beautifully said. And when we have the level of compassion, which is an unconditioned compassion, we aren't giving it out more or less to certain people because of their circumstances or situations. We are developing a kind of unconditioned compassion that is ready to rise up for any suffering without judgment or preference. Good luck. But it's nice to have an aspiration or to know what we're looking towards, right? It isn't, I'm going to generate my compassion so the most deserving of people will have it. No, for everyone, for everything. And that's a beautiful kind of way that we can kind of fine-tune our own instrument. Yeah, thanks for that. So a little bit more on this levels of compassion. So His Holiness has one more phrase here on the love of a mother and this unconditional compassion. He says, the unconditional loving attitude, that of a mother for her newborn, that I mean when I talk about compassion as the source of all shared ethical spiritual values. This love, which is so well shown in the Christian symbol of Madonna and Child that I find so powerful. So he, in the prior passage, talked about a mother who he was on a plane from Japan to the US, and all night this baby had cried. And he had fallen asleep and everything, and he woke up and he could tell that the mother hadn't slept. But she wasn't angry at her child. She wasn't upset. It was this kind of, she was there as a present, loving, unconditionally caring figure for the child. And for most of us, it is easier to have that kind of unconditioned care and love for children than it is for adults. And so when we think about the kind of unconditioned compassion, it's the kind we can have for children and sometimes pets, of just feeling a deep sense of care for them. So he says, generally I distinguish two levels of compassion. He's being so modest here. When he does his true teachings on compassion, there's like 600,000 and 4 million levels of compassion. But for us, he's giving us two. Generally, I distinguish two levels of compassion. The first is the biological level I've been describing, exemplified by the affection of a mother for a newborn child. The second is an extended level, which has to be deliberately cultivated. While compassion at the biological level can be unconditional, like the mother's love for her baby, it may also be biased and limited in scope. So I like his distinction here, that there's this compassion we need to generate that has more to do with everyone than those we already naturally like and feel close to. Sometimes that's called familial or kin compassion. It's a lot easier for us. In myriad studies, we see that it's easier for people to feel compassion, care, affection, and connection with people who are like them. And that the more other people are like you, the more people who can fall into that. So one of the powerful parts of compassion practices is we're actually putting more people into the sphere of people like us. Like the true radical nature of compassion practice is like everybody is like me because everybody suffers and wants to be free. And so you're almost like subverting the chaos of this world in which we are all living together and feel different or separate in some way, right? When we are not, period. We share 99.90% of our DNA, right? And we all have these same goals and values. We all suffer. We all eat. We all sleep, right? The what we share is so much bigger than what separates us. And compassion practice kind of helps remind us of that, or helps us leap over the more difficult obstacles in our way of seeing that clearly. He also says, furthermore, when there's an element of attachment, our affection and concern for others is often dependent on the way the others relate to us. We feel concern for those who care for us and treat us well, but when our affection is dependent on the fulfillment of our goals and expectations, which we project onto others, it will always be fragile. So as long as others meet our expectations, everything is fine. But as soon as they do not, our feelings of affection can easily turn to resentment and even hatred. So he says that we should cultivate this larger sense of compassion, not only for the people we don't know, not only for the kind of global level, but even for the people that we care about. Can we feel that level of, this might sound a little weird, but like mother to newborn style love for all of our friends and loved ones? Might be weird, but like, thinking of your parent as a newborn child, for example. But there's a way in which we feel and sense that kind of deservingness of love and care for newborns. And we sense their vulnerability and their need for our care that allows it to flow more easily. So I really understand that aspect there. Conversely, extended universal compassion is not rooted in any self-regarding element, but rather in the simple awareness that all other human beings who, just like oneself, aspire to happiness and shun suffering. With this kind of compassion, our feeling of concern for others is completely stable and unaffected by attitude they may have towards us. Even if others threaten or verbally abuse us, our compassion for them, our concern for their welfare remains. Genuine compassion, therefore, is directed not at people's behavior, but the people themselves. Since resentment, anger, and animosity bring us no benefit, it's clearly in our own interest to underpin our attitude towards others with this genuine, unconditioned, unbiased compassion. and that will bring us benefits as well. So yeah, sometimes people are mean and rude and inadvertently make us feel jealous or frustrated. Can we find compassion for them, not necessarily even because we believe they deserve it, we can even put that on hold for a minute, but because feeling compassion for them will be better for us. It'll increase our peace of mind. Like if you get really serious about your motivation for peace of mind, which I really encourage you to do so, it's the only thing that would make this life worth living and tolerable, then you gotta get serious about your compassion, right? So he's a little more to the point than Shantideva, but the exact same message, right? The exact same message here. Any thoughts on this before we do a little dedication, or just reflections on what it is like to apply this radical level of compassion? Yeah.
I think it's George Haas who said that if you don't love yourself 100% of the time, then 50% of your practice needs to be loving kindness. How would somebody know when they're done with that process?
Never. I don't think, I just think, here's the thing. Life is presenting us with all of this, it's the most awesome obstacle course for compassion ever. Because things are changing, right? And they're disappointing, and they're painful, and there's death and old age and sickness. And so as all of those things enter our lives, we're gonna need compassion again and again. If we had some sort of weird virtual reality environment, like we are in the Matrix, and we were just little, humans in these embryonic sacs, and everything happened in a world where nothing was wrong, maybe. But that doesn't sound very good, right? Otherwise, the world is going to kind of just keep piercing our heart over and over. And our need for compassion is always going to be at the ready. We do enter new levels of capacity. It goes from having to be this effortful practice to becoming a more reflexive practice. Who in this room feels that a little in your compassion? You've practiced it and it becomes a little bit more responsive. Good work, y'all. Yes. And it's not like it's magic, right? It is just practice. Every time something hurts, apply compassion. Whatever it is. Every single time. Even if it seems small, right? What do you call it? I kind of stubbed my finger today, got a splinter. Totally can do compassion right there. Also, someone yelled at me outside their car window when I was riding my bike. Totally need compassion right there and not yelling at them, which I didn't. Thank you very much. So it's we can always be using the world as our practice. And I don't think we're going to run out of opportunities anytime soon. Not with this election cycle. November 2020, guys, we're going to have a serious amount of practice happening here.
There is a local election coming up in just a few weeks.
Okay.
You should also be voting in.
Okay. Thank you for
It
that.
might be a lot, good practice, actually, really chill, and local initiatives.
Okay.
Nice choices.
All right. I like that.
You don't have to fight too much with each other about it.
I like it.
And if you had yelled back at them, that would be compassion too. 'Cause I had some episodes of that this week, and I felt much better meeting the shame with compassion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you never know. They were having a good time. They were
Compassion for yourself.
for yourself. Yes.
For making not such a compassionate response.
There's always room to grow. They were blasting Tracy Chapman, so I felt like they were on their own vision quest.
Which song?
Fast car. In the bike lane, no problem. Anyway, let's find just a comfortable position for a moment here and really walk the talk. So let's generate this heartfelt aspiration of compassion. The kind of compassion that can hold the whole world of suffering. This is a compassion that is completely boundless. It's like the ocean and vast. When we consider taking in and caring for the suffering of the world from this vast, vast heart of compassion. May our time here this evening together radiate out in seen and unseen ways so that all beings could know safety, all beings could be free, all beings could know ease and peace. Thank you all. There is a Sangha member tonight who it's their birthday. I won't say who it is, but can we just spend one moment and also send birthday love to one person in this room whose birthday it is? We love you. And if you are, is anyone here, it's their first time tonight? Welcome! San Francisco Dharma Collective, we have so many awesome things happening here. This is a volunteer-run entity. Teachers like myself, we get to show up because of the generosity of the volunteers. If you want to learn more about becoming a volunteer, you talk to Mace, Pamela. And if you would like to, we really encourage you to donate at your capacity. This is run on the generosity of folks like yourself. I myself donate and generously give to the center, so anything you give tonight goes 100% to the center. We appreciate anything and everything you can give. Next week, I'll be back here with Chandra, and we're going to do a hybrid of emotional balance and feeding your demons. Yeah, for those of you who know what that is, it's going to be juicy. If you don't know what it is, come anyway. Okay.
And I'll just say that we have a cool event Friday night. We have a day-long Saturday and a day-long Sunday, I think.
Wow.
So check out the calendars, and there's flyers up there for those.